Hello, this is Lady Boulay, and I hope you're having a wonderful day. Thank you for your support. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thank you for your comments, and thank you for your thumbs up. Thank you for all you do to support the channel. And yes, we are commanded to love one another, whether we want to or not, or whether we agree with each other or not. Well, add my name to the list of infuriated Black Americans who are upset by this fraud of a mayor of New York City jumping up making a speech about New York being built by immigrants. That is a lie. New York City was built on the backs of slaves, just like the rest of this country. So I beg to differ, Mr. Mayor, who is an Indian immigrant from Uganda. His family has been bouncing around all over until they landed in the United States. And now I guess he's supposed to be the great savior of New York City. I was highly offended when I saw this, and I thought about it before I made the video. But so many other Black people are speaking on it, and I decided I might as well stick my 2 cents worth in too and give a little background about who actually built New York City.
I want to talk about the myth that immigrants built America, that immigrants built New York City, and that everyone that is in America is an immigrant, because it's not true.
New York will remain a city of immigrants, a city built by immigrants, powered by immigrants, and as of tonight, led by an immigrant.
That eliminates the story of those formerly enslaved people and products of that enslavement, like myself. There's been a concerted effort to eliminate Black Americans from the conversation of their impact and importance in the way that this country was built and developed, but with free labor from my ancestors.
Yes, we know that there is an effort to erase Black history because America is embarrassed by the enslavement of Black people, you would think. But they're really not. When you hold somebody enslaved for 246 years and another 90 years, and then, 400 years later, you decide, well, I'm just going to erase that. It really cannot be done. It's too much documentation of what Black people did. The problem comes in when we get lazy and don't push back on this fraudulent mayor of New York City who wants to make everything about an immigrant story. America is not about an immigrant story. Immigrants came to the United States after the infrastructure of this country was put into place. I don't say they didn't come here and work jobs and get paid. They got paid to do what they did. But our family members did not get paid. They were displaced, they were discriminated against, and they were abused. So that is a part of American history, and we have to tell it, because something like this slick of a mayor of New York will come up and say immigrants built the city when they absolutely did not. Slavery was first introduced to New York City when it was called New Amsterdam in 1626, when the Dutch West India Company brought 11 enslaved Africans to the colony. This marked the beginning of institutionalized slavery in what would later become New York City. So let's go over the timeline. They first arrived in 1626. Their labor was owned by that Dutch West India Company, not individual colonists. And they were used to build infrastructure, roads, and grow food. I repeat, they were used to build infrastructure, roads, and grow food. In 1627, another arrival came when the ship Brunswick brought a group of enslaved Africans to Manhattan. In 1655, the first slave auction took place, marking the start of slavery as a commercial institution in New York City. By 1703, there was widespread enslavement in New York City. By the early 18th century, slavery was deeply entrenched in New York City. More than 42% of New York City households enslaved Africans, a proportion second only to Charleston, South Carolina. So New York City, as well as the state and the rest of the country, were deeply entrenched in slavery. And they were used to do everything: build infrastructure, grow food, and build roads and bridges and everything else that needed to be done. Enslaved Africans, not Indians, not Arabs, not Puerto Ricans, enslaved Africans. Slavery in New York was not limited to domestic service. Enslaved Africans worked as artisans, dock workers, and farm laborers in the Hudson Valley, Long Island, and beyond. The practice continued for 2 centuries until New York State passed the Gradual Abolition Act in 1799, with full emancipation finally achieved in 1827. So that's 200 years from 1626 to 1827. That's 201 years that slavery existed in New York State, including New York City. New York City was not built by immigrants, it was built by enslaved people that were forced into this country. New York City is often remembered as a hub of integration and diversity, but its early history is deeply tied to slavery. The enslaved population played a crucial role in building the city's infrastructure and economy, even though their contributions were long overlooked. Now, these are the facts about New York City. So, this whole bullshit about immigrants building a city is somebody's wishful thinking. It's a fantasy. It was not built by immigrants. Now, everybody has come to the United States after the thing was put into play and after the infrastructure was built. Yeah, they came here, they worked, they got jobs. They made some contribution, but they didn't build the city, and they didn't build the state, and they didn't build the country. So, what role did slaves and free blacks play in building New York City? The role of slaves and free black people in building New York City was significant and multifaceted. Enslaved Africans were integral to the city's construction, working on various projects such as building walls, forts, mills, bridges, and the city's infrastructure. They were also responsible for heavy transport, construction work, domestic labor, farming, and milling. Their efforts were part of the triangular trade, the transatlantic slave trade, where they were bought using New England rum sold in the West Indies and brought to New York to work on sugar and molasses production. The presence of both enslaved and free black people in New York City was a testament to the city's diverse and dynamic society, which was deeply influenced by the labor of these individuals. In other words, Black people built New York City. Now we know that white people were on the scene. White people were overseeing the projects. It was their vision. But the black people and the white people, let's say, and the white people built the city, heavily relying on the labor of the enslaved people. Slavery in New York State officially ended on July 4th, 1827. The New York legislature passed a law on March 31st, 1817, which set this date for final emancipation, making New York the first state to abolish slavery completely. Prior to this, a Gradual Emancipation Act was enacted in 1799, which freed slave children born after that date, but kept others indentured until 1827. Now, from 1627, when they first came to New York, till 1827, when they were freed, that was 200 years of free labor by the enslaved people to New York. Now, when Ellis Island was built, was when all those immigrants started piling in here. Ellis Island officially opened on January 1st, 1892. It became the nation's premier federal immigration station and operated until 1954, processing over 12 million immigrants during that time. Now, slavery ended in the state of New York in 1827. There was 200 years of free labor, and the infrastructure of New York City was in place. I must point out these were white immigrants. America had passed laws not to admit non-white immigrants into the United States. So these were white immigrants. Non-white immigrants began arriving in New York City in the 1920s, with significant numbers settling in the city after World War II. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965 marked a major shift, allowing for increased immigration from non-European countries, which significantly changed the demographic landscape of New York City. So non-whites only began coming into the United States in the 1920s. That's almost 400 years. That's from 1626 to 1920s. That's almost 300 years. So the enslaved people started coming in 1626. Non-whites began coming in the 1920s. That's almost 300 years later. New York City was built and up and running. So some immigrant from India cannot stand up before a crowd and say with a straight face that immigrants built the city, because it was 65 years after the enslaved people were set free that they started letting white people come in from Europe in large numbers. And then it was almost 300 years before they started letting non-whites into New York City. So they cannot claim that they built the city. They can say they came and worked and added to the infrastructure, but they didn't build it. They did not build it. Okay, I think I've made my case, but you let me know if I made my case. Thank you for listening and have a good evening.